G'day everybody, and welcome to today's episode of the podcast. In today's episode, I speak to a brilliant producer and just a lovely guy, a guy called Alan Artin. Alan lives in California, and I've been following him for a couple of years as just a fan of his Instagram content. And I reached out to him, never having met him, and he kindly agreed to sit down and chat with me on the podcast. We had a really great chat about producing, about self-doubt. We chatted about all things musical, and he was just a lovely, lovely guy to talk to. So please sit back and relax and enjoy my chat with the wonderful Alan Artin. Alan Artin, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Michael. I'm excited to start chatting with you.
Man, me too. You're the first person that I've interviewed on this podcast that I don't know personally, and I only just met you a couple of minutes ago. And I reached out to you because I'm a fan of yours. So I'm really excited to chat with you. Mate, do you remember the first record, either album or single, that you ever owned?
Oh, man. I would say that the first album I ever owned was Pink Floyd's album.
Nice. Which one? Dark Side of the Moon?
Yeah.
Nice.
And I would always listen to that when on my way to school. I remember being in middle school and just like walking to school, and I'd listen to it from start to finish and like pretend I was in a different reality.
Wow. What a great introduction to music, huh?
Yeah, that's when I knew.
How old were you then? So middle school, what's that? Like,
I would say I was probably like 13 or so.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how long after getting that album did you kind of think, I wouldn't mind making music myself?
What's funny is after I started going through Pink Floyd, I had merged into other artists like the Grateful Dead, and I even had a moment where I was into like emo punk rock music.
Nice. I wouldn't have picked that.
Yeah, it wasn't until I started to branch out and start playing piano. I was put in piano lessons a few years after, and that's when I started really developing an appreciation for music and production.
Nice. Did you learn classically?
I did, and to be honest, at the start of it, I hated piano lessons. Like, I wasn't motivated. My parents pushed me to do it, and my teacher was constantly complaining about me. She was saying that I wouldn't practice, I would show up unprepared. And at one point, they actually kicked me out of the course. They were like,
wow.
Yeah, like he's got to follow a certain standard of practice and regime, and he's not doing that. So after that, I put piano on hold for a few years.
Wow.
And I went to college, and my mom decided to get me a keyboard. And then, I was just left with the keyboard in my room. So at the start, I was like, I don't like playing piano. But after being in the environment with it for so long, I was like, I'll give it a shot. And I started like YouTubing songs, like pop songs that I liked. And I would just try to play notes with them at a time, one or two notes. And I started doing that every day, and it like re-triggered my passion for the instrument.
Wow. That's amazing. I think it's quite common that people think that they don't like playing music, or they might feel lazy because they're doing something they don't love. And once you discover that passion for it, you all of a sudden realize you're not lazy at all, that you've got a really good work ethic. It's just you had to discover what you love, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I'm very fortunate that I have this kind of calling or purpose in my life, because whenever I'm stressed out or I'm having a difficult day, I can just sit at the piano and kind of just let my worries kind of subside while I'm playing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very beautiful perspective on it. Do you remember the first track you wrote? The first
Oh,
piece of music that you did that wasn't someone else's?
yeah, I do remember. It was back in 2015, I think. It was this track called Stalin. So, a little backstory for you before that. I started to figure out kind of how to play piano, and I understood the basics.
Mm.
And I would post little Instagram videos of me playing alongside, like piano covers. And I had a friend at the time, his name was Assam, and he said, "These are cool. You should incorporate your melodies into like music production." And I was like, "How do I even go about that?" So he introduced me to Ableton.
Mm.
And when I first opened Ableton, I was like, "Oh my god, this looks like a foreign language. Like I don't know what
Mm.
I'm doing here."
Well, it is.
And yeah. Yeah, and so he was like, "All right, I'm gonna leave you two together, and you figure it out, dude. Just day by day, how you figured out the piano." So I was like, "All right." So it was about several months later when I got comfortable enough that I wrote this track called Stalin, and it was very simple, like the most basic track you could have written.
Yeah, yeah.
And I showed him, and he was like, "This is the start of something big."
When you listened to it at the time, did you just play it over and over again and go, "Wow, this is amazing," or did you think
Oh yeah,
it
I thought it
sucked?
was the best track ever.
Do you still feel like that when you make tracks?
I still get that feeling when I'm working on a new track that has pushed a little past my understanding. But when I listened back to Stalin, I was like, "Oh my god, what did I do?"
Did you ever put it up on Instagram or anything?
I did a long time ago, and I think I took it down since
Oh,
then.
boo! You're gonna have to put it back
I
up, I
know,
reckon.
re-upload.
I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know. For me, I find it really fascinating people's first foray into creating. And you did something on Instagram that I was reading and I found fascinating.
Hmm.
And you put up a video of this really beautiful piano composition, and you said, "I'm struggling between my desire to make funny videos and serious content." Uh, and I think that's a very common thing where people are like, I want to show all these different sides, but is that good for branding? Has your attitude changed since you did that post, or is that a constant battle?
You know, that's a great question. I think for me, in my experience, it gets easier when you practice showing all sides of you a lot more. If you take a break from it and go absent for a few months, you find that it's like riding a bike. Like when you first get on it again, it's kind of like you're rusty, and
Mm.
then you start getting the wheels greased and going a couple days in a row, and you feel, okay, I feel more comfortable. I feel like a secure sense of self putting all my sides out there.
Nice. Do you have a preference between doing funny stuff and doing serious stuff?
You know, that's a good question. I think it just depends on my mood. Depending on how I'm feeling during the day, sometimes I feel I want to inspire because I was inspired elsewhere, and
Mm.
sometimes I want to make people laugh since I had a funny laugh the day before.
Well, I first discovered you. I don't know what page it was. It was some page that I follow on Instagram, and they put up this video of yours. And I'm sorry to say I can't actually remember what the video was, but I pissed myself laughing. And straight away I just went to your page and I followed you. And I've really enjoyed following your journey uh, because you do show different sides of you. You do make videos that are pretty bloody hilarious, as we would say in Australia. Um, but you've got this beautiful kind of very musical content as well, and you make some kind of tutorial videos as well. Um, so yeah, my introduction to you was through the funny stuff.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I think I remember those pages, the producer memes and those types of stuff where I
Mm,
would like,
mm,
someone would be like, I think I remember a video where it was like, if you're not Snapchatting 50 girls, what are you doing? And it cuts to me, and I'm like, I'm trying to figure out the difference between dynamic EQ and compression.
That's what it was.
Yeah, something
That's
like that.
what it was. So, did someone kind of tag you and go, bro, your post has been shared, or did you see it independently?
Yeah, so at first I reached out to this producing social media, and I had pitched the concept to them. They really loved it, so they shared it, and then other producer memes saw that video, and it kind of like caught fire, and it went all over the producer meme social media.
Nice. And how did that feel when that was happening?
It felt fun. It felt awesome. Like I was connecting with people. They could relate to the musical humor. And at one point, there's this bigger artist called Kenny Beats.
Mm-hmm.
He had grabbed a hold of the video and used it as an intro. So I had challenged him to a beat battle.
Nice.
And then I sent him that video, and he was playing it live in his Twitch stream. So there were thousands of people watching it.
Wow. Wow.
And some people were roasting it and some people were loving it, but it was cool because everyone was contributing something.
That's fantastic. Yeah, you're creating that community.
Yeah.
So when that happened, so that you make this video and like all these different meme sites start sharing it, was there a part of you going, this is it, this is the start, I'm going to explode now?
Yeah, I definitely felt like I was happy that I was leaving an impact and making people laugh with my content. I think, though, that it's just nowadays with the amount of content on social media, something comes hot quick, and then in like a couple days, it's gone.
It's
so
gone.
You have to be constantly creating to stay at the forefront of people's minds.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you find social media something that you love doing, or is it a necessary part of the grind?
That's definitely a good question. One of those questions that makes me feel kind of torn down the middle, because some days it'll be like a stock market, right? Like you're doing super good one day and you're feeling great, and then the next day that stock plummets and you question your sense of identity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and how do you deal with those moments?
It's tough. Sometimes I'll reach out to friends who are also creators, and it helps to have a community that's kind of dealt with the same thing. And other times I'll just I'll be like doing a little self-talk in the mirror and realizing, it's not the end of the world. Nobody has died from not getting a social media post where they wanted it to.
Yeah.
And then also importantly, like living life outside of social media, having other things you can do to just maintain that sense of balance.
Which is what? What do you do to maintain your sense of balance?
Well, lately I've been going to the pool every day and swimming laps.
Oh, nice.
I'll also sometimes go down to the beach or get an exercise in. Just anything that's having me move around in the environment. You just got to get moving.
How about, is there lots of beautiful outdoor activities where you are?
Oh, definitely. I live about 15 minutes from the beach, so I'm there almost every other day, and I'm just thankful and grateful to be in an area that has sun almost 365 days a year.
Yeah, because you're in California, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we've got very similar climates. Have you been to Australia, by the way?
I have once. I went to Sydney.
Oh, nice. Did you find it similar-ish to California?
I definitely did. It was almost like I felt like California weather.
Totally, yeah. So, staying on social media stuff for a second, one thing that strikes me is your production quality, and not just audio production, but the whole production quality of your videos is very high. Is that a conscious decision that I've got to keep the quality at a certain level visually and from an audio perspective?
I would say so, and also my threshold for quality has gone up since I've spent more and more of my time doing it. I find that I get better rewards when I'm pushing myself to make better quality content instead of keeping myself limited.
Mm, mm, yeah. And so when you know, you put all this time into making a post, making a track, making a video, and you put it up, I get this thing that I call the post-release blues. And you work on something and you go, this is great, people are going to love this, and then you put it up and quite often it won't really do much. Do you suffer from the post-release blues?
Yeah, I've definitely experienced that on a weekly basis.
Yeah. Speaking of your social media content, you've done a whole bunch of videos recently where you fell in love with a Roland Phantom synth at Guitar Center or whatever. So just a simple question, when are you going to buy a bloody Roland Phantom synth?
You know what's funny is I posted that series on TikTok and people were saying by the 5 or 6 video, dude, just buy the damn thing already. And I think, well, I'll be honest with you, most of those sounds I am able to get close to with VST plugins like Serum.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the only other reason I would really need that synth is for show, for the appeal, or maybe some things during live performance in terms of knobs and pads to play live instruments on.
Mm-hmm. So if you're able to replicate that with plugs, what are some kind of plugs and synths that you're loving right now?
Oh, I can't live without Serum. So Serum's my bread and butter for anything synth related.
Yeah.
And if you familiarize yourself with the VST enough, you'll find that you could make almost any sound. It doesn't just have to be synths. Any percussion elements or transition effects. That app is a beast.
It really is. It's amazing. Do you start with the preset and go from there, or do you kind of build from the ground up?
I try to do both. If I find a preset sound I really like, I won't play with it too much, but sometimes I'll also look at how the preset was made and try to make my own from scratch.
Oh, okay. So you kind of really do a deep dive into the synth.
Yeah, definitely.
What about other than...
It takes me...
Sorry, you go.
Sorry. It takes me all about 5 minutes before I'm like, I don't have the attention span to do this, and then I go downstairs and get a snack.
Yeah. And what about other synths and plugins that you can't do without? Man. Are you a plugin junkie?
I would say so, yeah. I wasn't at the start, but it gets addicting having all of them.
Totally. Yeah, and you think if I just get this one plugin, all of a sudden my productions are going to be where I want them.
Yep, all my problems will go away. Yeah. And then you go do the car test, you're like, I'm right back to square one.
Exactly. So sorry, I interrupted you. Synths and plugins. I'd love to know what your go-tos are.
Right, so I use Serum, and I also love Silent a lot.
I've never used Silent. I've heard a lot of people talk about it.
Very, very good for electronic music. There's a lot of supporting layer sounds that you can get out of Silent, and I also really like some of their arpeggiated sounds.
Okay, nice. Are you a keyscape user?
Oh man, I almost became one, but my go-to piano sound would probably be either Alicia Keys or Nor.
Okay, yep. Yeah, Alicia Keys was my go-to piano until I got Keyscape.
Oh yeah.
It's expensive. But I actually made a YouTube video where I kind of test Keyscape out for the first time. And I don't think I've ever been blown away by a virtual instrument like I have been with Keyscape. I'd totally check it out, man. But it is expensive, I get that. It's like, I don't know what it is in America, but it's like $500 here.
Yeah.
But it's an extraordinary thing. So how did you get into making EDM from listening to emo?
That is a good question. I actually went to my first music festival back in 2018. A little festival here in Palm Springs known as Coachella.
Oh, just that little one, yeah.
Yeah, the tiny one.
That tiny little festival, yeah.
So I went to that with my friend, and I had witnessed Odessa performing live. And I'd never heard anything like that when electronic music was kind of enmeshed with these organic instrumental style, cinematic sounding songs. So I was just blown away because I really love things that sound very melodic, harmonic, and at the same note, like it's rhythm that you can dance to. So once I heard that, I was just like, oh, I have to do this. Like, it's so beautiful and like moving.
Nice. And so how did you go from that moment to making your own? Did you have Ableton at this point?
At this point, I did, yes. And it really took sitting down with Ableton for a long time and trying to figure out, how am I going to take this inspiration that I feel and turn it into my own music? Because I didn't want to copy Odessa's sound exactly. I just wanted to replicate the feeling that I got from that into writing.
Nice.
And, when I was first writing, I would make a melody that I would finally get goosebumps, and I'd get super excited, and I'd be like, wait, don't get too excited. Just stay focused so that you can finish this project and so that you don't put it in your rough draft folder and never visit it again.
That's very interesting, because part of it is kind of riding the wave of that excitement, right? And the other part is not getting too ahead of yourself. So how do you balance those two things?
Well, that's sometimes why I think I got involved in the field of psychology. It really helps to kind of keep yourself self-aware and recognize, when your emotions are swinging, when your attention is fleeting, so that you can kind of check in with yourself and be like, if I'm working on a project that sounds great and I want to finish this song and release it, how can I continue to use my time to stay focused, stay present? And, for me, if I get way too excited, I just, I'll either call a friend and get distracted, like, you'll never believe what I made, or I'll go on social media, I'll be like, check this out, you guys got to hear this. And then by the time all the attention's coming in from that, they're like, finish the song, what are you doing? And then I'm like, oh shit, like, an hour has gone by. I forgot where I was in the creative process.
Yeah. And so how do you know that you finished a song?
I'll press play from start to finish. I'll really take a listen with my headphones, close my eyes, and see if I hear anything. And if I feel like this song is, at a point where I'm happy with the songwriting and the feeling is still there, then I let it go. I also heard a quote that says, something like 80% of the song is finished within the first 20 minutes of effort.
Wow.
We drive ourselves crazy with like the super microscopic details, like, is the EQ perfect? Is this kick sitting perfectly in relation? But when do we draw the line between that and starting to become like perfectionists?
Yeah, absolutely. And so really for you, I love what you said about you close your eyes, you sit back and listen to it, and if it all sounds great, you let it go, which is beautiful. It's like if you love somebody, set them free. That's a really beautiful way of looking at it. So you did a track, Many the Miles, a beautiful, amazing remix, which I love, and that's just hit 1 million streams on Spotify, I noticed when I was doing my research, like a proper interviewer.
Thank you.
Can you describe the feeling of when that hit 1 million streams?
Oh man, I can't tell you. Like, it felt like I never thought in a million years that the song would hit 1 million. And it was just like, it was such a wild moment. I remember calling my friend who lives in Ohio, and I sent him a screenshot. He's also a producer, and like, he wrote back in all caps, like, "Let's go, baby. This is just the beginning. Like, you hit a huge milestone."
Unreal. Did you celebrate it?
I did. I went to the cabinet and picked out my favorite wine and just poured back a couple glasses.
Nice.
And played Many the Miles, ironically, while drinking.
That's unreal. And did any part of you go, okay, I'm succeeding. I'm succeeding in this.
Definitely. And at the same note, it's interesting because just when you have that feeling, it's replaced with what's next.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's never quite enough, is it?
It's not. And then you start thinking, well, how do I get to 2 million? How do I get to 5 million? And so part of it becomes, I heard this one quote that was talking about the entrepreneurial mindset and how, the most successful entrepreneurs in the world, they're never settling down and being like, all right, this is enough. I can sit back and relax. They're always thinking, what is the next move? And they're fueled by that. That's why they are always working and they're never resting. And you got to ask yourself, do you want to live that kind of life, or do you want to have balance where you can enjoy some of the accomplishments and successes truthfully that you've earned?
Do you think there's a difference between what you do and probably what a lot of those entrepreneurs do? And that is, they're spending a lot of time probably thinking of marketing strategies and how to minimize their payroll, and whereas you and I, when we are lying awake at 2 a.m. thinking about our business, it's generally music stuff. What if I dropped out the beat in the bridge and did something totally different? So I don't know, for me it doesn't feel like even though we're constantly thinking about our business, which is making music, it doesn't feel like heavy work most of the time. It's just a passion. Do you feel that?
Definitely. I do. I'll tell you what, though. Being an independent artist and having to manage a lot of different hats that otherwise you could outsource to a label, a lot of the business side kind of leaks into the passion of music. So, for example, once I finish a song, I'm doing the artwork, I'm running the advertisements, I'm managing social media in terms of engaging. And so, I feel that business side start to leak into those 2 a.m. thoughts, and instead of being like, I can't wait to add that extra layer, I'm thinking like, are my ads kind of like running at a good cost right now? Is it going to cut into my bills, etc.? Yeah.
How do you find the business side of it?
It is, I enjoy learning new skills. So I like the fact that, I can be self-reliant and know kind of, if I did hire a team one day and somebody wasn't doing their part, it wouldn't be like I would try to be like completely clueless to what he was doing. I'd have a general sense.
Nice. Do you have an opinion on the music industry itself?
It's tough. I've I've had several conversations about it with my friends. It's tough because I think a lot of people have varying opinions on the music industry, and they're such a big player in how things are generally done that you want to kind of keep a good relationship with them. Like in the music world, basically I've learned that if you play nice and kind of get along with everybody, it's better than like if you're an independent artist frustrated with the system, to go on and be like, I hate the music industry, because it
Yeah.
won't do you good in the long run.
Very interesting. I try and ignore the industry as much as I possibly can. Only
That's
because
awesome.
I find the reason that I'm still doing this, and I'm spending every day of my life, most hours of the day making music and still being in love with it, is because I haven't let the business kind of drag me down. Problem is, I'm poor as fuck.
Right.
Because money's never been the motivating goal for me, I suppose. But man, it's tough being independent and having to do it all yourself, isn't it?
It is, and I'll say this: I can totally relate to what you're saying as far as money not being the motivator. My goal with music would be to generate enough money for my music so that I could do it full time and not have to worry about, like, do I have to pay the bills today? Like,
Yeah.
am I going to be able to pay for studio time? Yeah, that sort of thing.
It's not too much to ask for someone just to give us like $10 million each. That'd do it. That's not much money in the overall scheme of the world economy. Just 10 million to you, 10 million to me, and then we could do all of that and not worry about the business.
That's all in a day's work, right?
Yeah. Well, let's put it out there into the universe via this podcast that if anyone has a spare 20 million bucks lying around, just divvy it between you and me.
That's so neat.
So you're now working in the mental health space. Would you mind just talking a little bit about how you got into that and where you are currently?
Yeah, absolutely. A couple things kind of got my interest in mental health. Primarily, both my parents were therapists.
Okay. What kind of therapists? Like
They
psychologists?
were yeah, my dad is a psychiatrist and my mom is a psychologist.
Okay.
And so my brother actually is also going to school to be a psychiatrist. So it's kind of like a whole family of mental health field experts.
Yeah.
So that kind of got my involvement. And then I also noticed in high school, a lot of people would tell me that I was a good listener and that this field would kind of complement this strength because they were used to talking at their friends and their friends talking back and no one could really hear and understand each other. And so when they had that experience with me, they were kind of like, have you ever thought about being a therapist? Because you ask people like, oh, how does that make you feel? And that's like the staple question of a therapist, right?
Yeah, right. It's amazing how much it's changed in my lifetime. When I was at school, which was in the 80s, it was really not talked about, and just in that last kind of 30 years, mental health has become normalized to talk about, which is so incredibly important. Do you believe that everyone should see a psychologist?
Oh man, that's a great question. I think nowadays the way mental health has kind of lost its stigma and that people go for a lot more everyday to-day difficulties, I think everyone should treat seeing a therapist like they would going to the dentist.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. How can someone find a good therapist?
I would say one of the best websites to go to is Psychology Today.
Okay.
You can find therapists that are in your area, and if you have an insurance plan, you can find the ones that are in network with your insurance, and even the types of therapy that they specialize in.
Okay. So with you studying this and being a therapist, do you see a therapist yourself?
I did. I had to actually, as part of my requirement for the course.
Okay.
I was required to see a therapist for 20 personal hours.
Okay.
And so we had 1 hour a week, so we spent time for 20 weeks to kind of identify what were my modes of thinking, how would certain ways of me thinking impact my ability to be a therapist positively or negatively. Do I have any issues with projection, or would I be a counter transfer of my patient onto someone else?
Oh,
Something
wow.
like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Right. So you're going at it specifically, how is this going to affect my own ability to do the work?
Yeah. And of course, during those sessions, we also talked about, personal issues with difficult relationships in the past, certain fears I had that might be irrational, and kind of how to address those in a better way.
Wow. So how much did you get out of those 20 hours?
I still practice some of those things to this day, and that was about 3 years ago.
Nice. Wow. And do you find yourself using a lot of those techniques in your own work?
Definitely. But, therapists, we're all still humans too, so we still have our occasional irrational bout where, we
course.
justify it later. Yeah.
I would vouch to say that would probably happen daily.
Oh, yeah.
That's
for sure.
People that think that they don't have any internal negative dialogue and all that stuff, man, it's a constant battle. I did an interview a couple of weeks ago with my counselor, who changed my life and was the most extraordinary professional that I've ever had to deal with. And when he first came to me, I said to him, "How long is this going to take?" And he said, "Oh, well, it depends." And I was thinking maybe 2 hours will sort everything out. He came round, he used to come to my house, which was amazing. And we did about 3 hours a week for an entire year. And it was $100 an hour. And initially I thought, there's no way I can afford this. And at the end of the year, that I just didn't even consider the money that it had cost me, because it was so incredibly life-changing.
Right.
And one of the questions I asked him in our podcast was, do you think that all human beings suffer from trauma in their lives?
Oh, man, that's a great question. What did he say to that?
He said, "Oh, that's a great question." And then he gave a long answer, and he said, "Probably." But he can't answer for all humans. I think so. God, I'm going to have to watch the podcast back.
Yeah.
I can't quite remember the specifics of the answer, but I'm pretty sure he said probably, but I can't be 100% sure.
That's probably the same answer I would give, honestly.
Nice.
And myself included, by the way.
Yeah, me too. I find one of the common things that we face as creatives is crippling self-doubt. Could you talk me through your experience with crippling self-doubt?
Oh, yeah. Man, I still actually deal with it to this day.
Of course.
And I will say that a lot of it changes as you go throughout your creative process, I think. But some of the core themes I find are comparison, for one. When you're on social media, it's so easy to go and look at somebody else that's doing better than you, and feeling like you're either missing out or not doing what you're supposed to be doing, and you fall into this rut.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I also find that paying attention to metrics can also be a factor. If you're paying attention to your likes or comments determining your worth as an artist, versus putting things out because you love what you do and you want to share it with even one person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's all well and good to say, even if I can just touch one person with my music. But it doesn't work that way, does it?
No.
And how can it, you know, you're a mental health professional. How can we overcome that? How can we realize that actually it just existing is good enough? And if it does impact one person, that is a phenomenal achievement, and that should be enough to make us feel really fantastic about what we've created. How can we retrain our thinking, do you think?
I think it has to do with our expectations of ourselves and the world, and also recognizing that expectations of yourself is never something that is stagnant. It's always changing in relation to your environment and what you're experiencing in life. So this is why sometimes when someone does really well on a song, they're like, wait, I just got a taste of this whole other world. I want this like all the time. And so their expectation just jumped very high.
Yeah.
We got to be aware of that and bring it back down to where, you know, where were you day one at this?
So is that realistic to... Because if day one is, my expectation is I want to be able to play Imagine by John Lennon on the piano, and then all of a sudden, you know, you're getting 1 million streams for your remix. How can you expect to have your expectations now the same as they were when you first started making music?
You know what? It's funny. This is actually a great question, because I think keeping things in mind that keep you humble and grounded goes a long way in this. And I remember I was actually watching this video by The Rock, and he was saying that one of the things he did when he kept succeeding over and over was he would go back to difficult thoughts he had just to remember, like, hey, like, I remember what that felt like, and I kind of want to keep that in my mind somewhere to keep me grounded and remember, like, I had $7 in my pocket at one point.
Yeah.
And I always come back to that.
Yeah, wow.
So that you don't get lost in the other world.
He's such an inspiration, that guy.
Yeah.
My ex-girlfriend was basically more in love with him than me, which is fair enough. And I'd always paid kind of cursory attention to him. You know, he was the Rock, the wrestler, and then he was making movies. But then I started following him on social media. I was like, I just love this guy so much. I think I love him more than I love myself now. Isn't that bad? So when you make a track, do you have a set process that you go through, or is it different every time?
I will usually see if I can start with some sort of full acapella to start my songwriting process. And then once I pull in the acapella, I'll start playing around with chords, seeing what sounds nice. And then if I have an idea, like, I'll record an 8-bar loop, you know, and then just kind of go from there. Sometimes I just get on Instagram, record the 8-bar loop, and I'll be like, done for the day.
Where do you get your acapellas from generally?
I usually honestly just do YouTube to MP3 converter. Because my idea with the acapella is more just for the songwriting process. I just need a placeholder there to kind of figure out my verse, chorus, bridge.
Yeah, right. So that brings me to a question that I think is very, very important. And partially because I'm not really that confident that I know the answer. What do you have to do? So if you're doing a remix of a song, so let's say you go to YouTube, you grab an acapella, you make a track. How do you get legal clearance to do all that?
Well, as far as remixes go, if it's a cover song, like Many the Miles was a cover song for Sarah Bareilles, but it was sang by a different singer, then you have an option to select that it is a cover song, and you pay a licensing fee. I think it's somewhere between $8 to $10, and then you're allowed to post the song. If you use the vocals and lyrics from the singer of the original, then it can't go on anything that's generating royalties.
Yeah.
That's why you have to go on like SoundCloud or YouTube to post those.
Yeah. But they can still pull them from YouTube.
What was that?
They can still pull those videos off YouTube.
Right.
So, I did a cover of there's an Australian band that you wouldn't have heard of who are massively famous here called Cold Chisel, and they have a song called Flame Trees, which is, I think, probably one of the most beautiful songs I've ever heard. And I did a piano cover of it, just playing and singing in my studio like 10 years ago. And then a few years ago, I went, I wonder, I'm going to check out that cover, and it's been taken down. And my understanding is that the owner of the copyright can remove, even if you do a cover of it on YouTube, they can choose to pull it down if they want. And I spoke to a lawyer about it one day, and I said how much that pisses me off, because you got some kid in their bedroom doing a cover of an Ed Sheeran song, and then they put it up on YouTube or Instagram. They're not trying to make any money out of it. And then the record company pulls it down. That kid is then discouraged from doing more covers, and it probably kills a bit of their love for music, and they probably blame the artist. And I asked a lawyer about it, and he said, look, the reason is that the owner of the copyright always has the final say. So, for example, what if a kid's doing a cover of your song, not monetizing it, and he said, but just for argument's sake, on the back wall they've got a Nazi flag. You, as the owner of the copyright, should be able to get that removed. So that's my understanding of, if you own the copyright in a song, even if someone's doing a cover on YouTube, that they can still pull them down and do all the time. Have I got that confused?
No, I'm honestly not too sure. The extent of my knowledge for that sort of video being taken down would be, I recall I did some covers of popular songs, at which point they were flagged for using the vocals of a similar artist, and then the sound was just removed. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, which is kind of disappointing when that happens.
Yeah, definitely.
A music video generally relies on the sound, I find.
Yeah, it's tough to watch one with the...
So, if you release a song on Spotify, do you make sure you've got all the right clearances, or is it a little bit of hit and hope?
Oh, yeah, definitely. At the start, though, it was definitely hit and hope, but moving forward, like, you make sure that you've got all your ducks aligned, because if a song does take off, you don't want to have a notice saying, this song just hit so many streams, we have to take it down now because it violates it.
And so do you consult a lawyer, or is there an industry body that you can ring up and check with, or how do you make sure that you're cool to release a remix?
I've had to learn through trial and error, and also a lot of Googling. Just trying to figure out. And DistroKid, if you're going to upload to Spotify, DistroKid is pretty good about that type of stuff, like being able to identify whether a remix is good. In the early stages of my song releasing, I had like a Harry Styles Watermelon Sugar remix.
Nice.
That I had uploaded to DistroKid without knowing about this rule.
Yeah.
And they found that, they had emailed me after saying, we realized that this song uses Harry Styles vocals, it can't be uploaded to Spotify. Okay.
So if you get someone else to do a vocal on it, how do you work out, how is songwriting splits worked out?
That's a good question too. Usually, it really depends on your relationship with the artist and what's being done up front. So some artists, like, you can find on Sound Better and just kind of pay them a flat rate in exchange for keeping 100% of the royalties.
Mm-hmm.
Other artists, you have to use a percentage, and I believe most singers get between, I've seen anywhere from 15 up to like 85%. It really varies.
Wow, that's quite a discrepancy, isn't it?
Yeah. I guess it also depends on the size of the artist. Like, if you're using a huge artist like Rihanna.
Well, what about
Dua
Lipa? You've done a Dua Lipa remix.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Well, the Dua Lipa remix was not uploaded to Spotify because I didn't have Dua Lipa or their team's permission. But so when I posted it to SoundCloud or YouTube, it was fine.
Right. Okay. Do you ever?
And nowadays, I believe that if you upload something to YouTube, the copyright can also just claim ad revenue on that video.
Yes.
So that it just doesn't generate money.
Yeah. I've had that in a lot of videos that I've made where I can't monetize it, which is fine. But I've also had them actually say, no, you can't. Which is, it's frustrating, but it's just the way it is.
That is very frustrating, because in those scenarios, you're not doing anything really wrong. It's just kind of,
Yeah, you're just kind of being a fan of a song and giving it your own homage. And music, from the creation of blues and jazz, it evolved by people taking from other artists and other songs, and
right.
It's evolved its whole journey through sharing ideas, and now it feels like everyone's like, no, that's my idea, you got to pay me. It's a lot more cutthroat. There's a fantastic documentary, and it's called I think it's called RIP, a Remix Manifesto, and I think you should check it out. I think you'd love it.
I'd have to check that out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's called RIP as in R-I-P, a Remix Manifesto. And one thing that he was saying in that documentary was that Disney were kind of the first people to kind of really take ownership of copyright. And I think it was in the 70s, there was a primary school in New York City, and they had murals in the school for the little kids of Donald Duck and Mickey Mouse. And Disney came in and said, you don't have permission to paint those on your walls, and you have to take them down. That kind of shit. And that's where the business really fucks the art, if you'll excuse that way of putting it. But
no, I hear you.
That's very, very sad. When it comes to your funny videos, how do you come up with ideas?
That is a good question. Sometimes I'll go on like YouTube or TikTok, and I'll watch videos and see, how can I relate this to music, for example. There was one video I saw of this guy at McDonald's, and he pulls up, and the McDonald's worker says, "Welcome to McDonald's, is that it?" And the guy's like, "How can that be it? I haven't even started my order yet." So I incorporated the similar idea, but the way I tied it to music was the first clip of me is like stretching after being in the seat for 8 hours and being like, "Oh man, I want to go get something to eat." And then next scene is me in my car in a empty parking lot pretending to talk to McDonald's about how, like, just get my order right or I'm coming in there.
Nice. So
Yeah.
to a certain extent, there's an attempt to always stay current and stay on trend. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, and I also think for me personally, like nowadays TikTok rewards people who use like trending sounds. But I find that if you want more long-term growth, you just got to stay true to who you are and kind of put out you. There's only one version of you, right?
Exactly.
Like it's easy to be somebody else, but if you just keep showing up as your own self, like eventually people are going to be like, "Wow, like I've never seen this."
Yeah, that's great. I think that's how I deal with crippling self-doubt that we were talking about earlier.
Right.
Is that I kind of remind myself that all I can do is be myself. It's all I've got is me. And because I always compare myself to my favorite artists, and I go, fuck, I'm nowhere near as good as them. But it's important to realize that they don't sound like me. You know, they can't do what I do. And it's, if you realize that that's all you've got is yourself, and it's what you do with that and how you present that to the world. To me, that really helped with the self-doubt.
No, I love that.
What's next for you, my friend?
So, well, funny enough, I've actually been taking DJ lessons at Guitar Center for the last month or so.
That's why you're there constantly playing the Roland Phantom.
Literally, so I do my 30-minute lesson and then I go and play with the Phantom.
For like 3 hours.
Yeah, then they're like, "Sir, we got to close up here."
Nice. And what's DJ lessons teaching you?
Just, the fundamentals, beat matching, mixing songs in key. It helps to have somebody there to kind of guide you when you're learning something new. Because, with my Ableton journey, I think I would have cut my time in half if I was spending my time with someone who already knew Ableton.
But do you think that even though it would have cut your time in half, that you mightn't have learnt it quite as in depth?
That probably not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think like spending more time with it alone, it did take longer, but I think probably not as much.
Is DJ school helping the way you produce tracks?
It is giving me a better understanding of transitions, I guess you would say. Also, like, when you're mixing a song in a DJ software, you have the song file in front of you, but there's no place that says, like, this is the verse, this is the chorus. And the colors are kind of a little jumbled, too, so they're not color coordinated. You just kind of really got to know the song. And then that way, like, when to mix it in correctly.
Yeah, nice. Mix it in correctly rather than mix it incorrectly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I thought
exactly.
at first you were saying and then you can mix it incorrectly. I was like, okay, that's interesting. And so, so you're doing this DJ school. What next?
So after this, I want to start putting myself out there to play some shows.
Mm-hmm.
My grand goal with all this music journey was to play at Coachella because that's where I was first inspired for EDM music.
Nice.
So that would be like an ultimate like victory for me. So I'm moving in that direction, kind of playing shows, and that will also get me one step closer to being a full-time musician.
Okay, yeah, doing the live shows.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's much easier to make an income that way than off streaming royalties nowadays, isn't it?
Oh yeah, no, seriously, like 1 million streams nowadays pays for a cup of coffee.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty depressing. But, it's certainly, if you go back before streaming, it was just record companies held all the power. And if you didn't have a record company behind you, you had no career. It was that simple. And nowadays we can build our own careers, like someone like yourself who's, self-managing, and you're able to do that now, and you never know when your next release is going to be the one that gets 200 million streams, and all of a sudden you're talking some decent coin.
Yeah.
And you can do it on your own, under your own steam, which is, I think it's a much better time now to be an independent artist than it was 20 years ago.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's the level playing field has definitely been a lot more equalized since independent artists have come to rise.
Yeah, absolutely. What songs are you working on?
I actually have a deep house song coming out this Friday that I just posted about, called Out of Body. It was a funny story with this song in particular. I made sure to only open the project file when I was frustrated or angry during the day.
Oh, wow.
Because I wanted to see if pouring that emotion in the track would give it like a darker vibe.
Wow. And
it did. It became one of the darkest songs that I've ever written. Anything from the artwork to the instrumentation used is very I just imagine like a very dark industrial techno kind of vibe.
When you listen back to that track, has it transformed those dark feelings into something positive now?
Yeah, it's transformed it into like this like fierce positive energy, like being at the front of like a main stage festival and just kind of putting your hands up in the air and just like releasing all that bad energy through sound.
I think that's an incredible idea. Because it generally, I find it personally, if I'm in a shitty mood, I don't want to create. I wait until I'm feeling good about creating, and I actually deliberately try as many things as I can to make sure I'm in the right headspace to create. But I just think the idea of waiting until, okay, I'm not opening it if I'm happy. I think that's incredible, man.
Yeah. And that was very fun to write too.
Yeah. And so did your mood transform as soon as you started working on the song?
Yeah, I found that I was turning that anger and frustration into like the same type of energy you have when you take pre-workout. Like fired up and ready to go to the gym and just put up a crazy amount of weight.
I don't know what it feels like to take pre-workout or go to the gym. So when are we going to see you on stage at Coachella? Next year?
Oh man, I want to say this as soon as possible, honestly.
Nice. When you think about the potential of being famous, how does that sit with you?
I think that my relationship with fame is kind of like, I want the fame to be a byproduct of the success. So I don't want my focus to be like, I have all this fame and glory. I want it to be the music impacts this many people, which just inevitably makes my name like 300 million people would know it.
Nice. Have you ever considered what it would be like to be kind of Kanye West level fame?
Yeah, it's funny because sometimes I think Kanye is a very interesting a person, and I think that he thinks very differently than most artists do. Like his brain is kind of wired a little bit differently. So I think he's got some really unique out of the box things that he can offer the artist world.
Yeah, but imagine not being able to do anything without... I remember, that all of the famous people I've met, I stamped that moment in time. You know, I met Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin just randomly on the street in London. And we ended up chatting for about 3 or 4 minutes, whatever. Now for him, he wouldn't remember that from, at all. But for me, that's one of the most amazing experiences of my life. And to be that kind of famous where every single person that meets you remembers that moment for the rest of their lives.
Oh, yeah.
It'd be a lot of pressure, right?
That's actually a great point, yeah.
It'd be, yeah, like just knowing that here I am, it was 15 years ago that I met him. And I still, talk about it. And I still remember I met Jimmy Page, He's not going, oh, man, 15 years ago I was at the laundromat and I met this guy from Australia. I think the older I get, the less desire I have for fame. And being a producer who's behind the scenes. You're kind of mainly an artist producer, right? Do you ever produce for other people?
I've only done a couple of other projects for people, and actually one of them was a podcast. I wrote the intro music for a podcast on Spotify.
Nice.
Yeah.
Were you happy with it?
I was, yeah. It was my first go at it, but at that point, I had experience with music writing for a few years, so I knew kind of how to go about doing something like that.
Nice. Are you a big listener of podcasts?
Yeah, there's one I really like called Criminal. Each week they have a different story about some bizarre thing going on in a different city.
Man, I'm a true crime podcast fan, and I think people that are into true crime get it, right? But I feel like if you're not into true crime, you must just think that you're a sicko if that's what you listen to. But they're just fascinating stories. Can I recommend probably the greatest interview that I've heard as a creative? There's a podcast called Broken Record, and it's Malcolm Gladwell and Rick Rubin, and this particular episode is Rick Rubin. You know Rick Rubin, obviously, I'm assuming.
Mm-hmm.
Rick Rubin interviewing Andre 3000 from Outcast, and it is the most extraordinary interview. I highly, highly recommend it. And the thing that I remember about it the most was Rick was saying when he got his first number one, he'd been working, to get this number one, and he said he got the number one and he was miserable. And they were both talking about the fact that the greatest time of their creative lives was before they really smashed it, was when they were trying to get there. And that made me realize that for people like me, that I'm in the best bit, If one day I do crack it with something, I'm probably in the best bit. And so I highly recommend Rick Rubin, Andre 3000, Broken Record podcast. Give it a listen. It's amazing.
Oh, definitely. That sounds interesting.
Man, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I can't wait to keep following your journey. I can't wait to hear what you're going to come up with next. And I can tell you personally that whether you make serious content on social or humorous content, it's all beautiful, my friend. So keep doing what you're doing, and keep on building fans on the other side of the world like me.
Awesome, man. I really appreciate the kind words.
Oh, my pleasure. It's all from the heart. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you very soon, hopefully.
Sounds great, Michael. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Al.